Hello everybody and welcome back to another Underdog episode. We got the season 4 finale, Dream. The wind is howling, the moon shining onto the soft ground. The dirt in front of the cross is getting hit by the cross. Soft footsteps can be heard to the side. Eventually, black suited legs walk onto the frame and they stop next to the grave. It cuts to the person's chest where a small circular object can be seen, but it's covered by the shadows of the surrounding trees. The person reaches up to the device and grabs onto the edges of it before twisting it and locking it into place, as a rainbow color fills the lightning bolt in the center of the device. It cuts to an angle higher up to reveal that it's a dreamer. He puts two hands together and pulls them apart as if there was an invisible string in between them, holding tightly onto it. He lets go of the imaginary string and then holds out both hands as a rainbow dust flows out of his fingertips and into the grave that holds Wanderer. He shakes his hands and looks away from the grave. He looks forward and snaps open a fragmented portal before walking over Wanderer's grave and toward his portal, leaving behind the set of footprints. It zooms in on the footprints as the portal can be heard closing in the background. To Dylan, who still stood in the grass. Suddenly, Dylan's breathing becomes heavy and he loses control of his body and falls backwards, going limp. Alan looks over at him and speeds behind him to catch him and lower him slowly to the ground. Alan looks at Dylan's closed eyes and speeds into the warehouse, leaving the door swinging back and forth. On the ground, Dylan's face is turning red as he cannot pull a breath from the air. He tries to stand up but falls to the ground, but finally breathes in a full breath as Alan comes running back outside, now with Jake trailing him. Dylan rolls his body over and props himself up with his arms and looks at the grass below him. Tears fall from his eyes as he continues breathing in the crisp air. Dylan starts to sob and cry uncontrollably. Alan looks over to him and frowns. Alan looks back at Jake, who can see Dylan's turmoil. Suddenly, Dylan gets up and stumbles a bit before walking into the warehouse. "You got him?" Alan says towards Jake as he's standing over the slow-to-awake Wanderer. "Yeah." Jake turns into the warehouse as it cuts to the inside. Dylan, with his tear-streaked face, marches through the warehouse, stepping past Mandy, who notices his state. She tries to get her from the couch, but Jake just hovers his hand at her, signaling her to sit back down, which she does. It cuts to Brosnick, who's still sitting in the corner of the warehouse. Dylan walks into frame and doesn't stop in front of Brosnick. Dylan bends down and grabs Brosnick's neck. "Where is Dreamer?" Surprised, Brosnick just stares at Dylan, unable to respond. "Where?" Dylan shouts, shaking Brosnick violently. "The Dream Realm! I know!" "Where in the Dream Realm?" The two stare at each other for a moment, the air thick, while Jake watches behind Dylan. Where your house used to be. It's there." With a forceful throw, Dylan lets go of Brosnick's neck and swiftly turns around, pushing Jake out of his path. Dylan starts walking for the front door but hesitates before turning around and walking in a different direction, a distraught look beginning to form on his face. It zooms onto his face before it cuts to Dreamer's lair. Zara and Miranda can be seen sitting on the floor of their cells, still on opposite sides of the wall between them. It cuts closer to Zara's face. Her expression shows no emotion at all, same with Miranda's. It cuts to Zara's hand, her fingers picking at each other, scratching against her skin. A loud crackly sound plays and it rebounds to the secluded base, making both girls snap their head up. It cuts to an angle behind the newly formed fragmented portal. Dreamer walks out of the portal and it closes, his back facing the camera. Zara and Miranda both sides down a little bit at the sight of Dreamer, making them slightly scared. "What's taking Dylan so long?" It cuts to Zara blinking, unsure how to respond. Miranda's voice can be heard from the other side of the wall. "Why do you even need us?" Zara looks at the wall where Miranda's voice came from. Zara looks back with the force field at Dreamer. "Bargain." Zara takes a long breath, looking down at the floor. "Leverage, of course." Light footsteps can be heard tapping on the ground, approaching Zara's cell. The footsteps stop. "Do you mind telling me something?" Zara looks back up and at Dreamer. "Oh, by all means." It cuts to Dreamer's face where a small smile forms. "I would love to get this off my chest." Dreamer lowers his head as he steps to the right, toward Miranda's side of the wall. Miranda looks at Dreamer with furrowed brows and bloodshot eyes. Dylan is really asleep. He's in a coma, actually. It cuts back to Zara in her cell. As she's listening to Dreamer, she also furrows her eyebrows. It cuts back to Dreamer. Everything is branched off his brain, similar to how this reality works. Miranda's eyebrows relax, but her expression only deepens with confusion. That storm, the pink moon. Dylan is waking up faster than I perceived. It cuts back to Zara, her face equally as confused as Miranda's. She lets out a very short, cut-off breath before her knees start to give out. She falls to the ground, lightly, her breath still choppy. It cuts back to Dreamer, who walks sideways back in view of Zara's cell. I'm deeply sorry, but I've been pulling the strings the whole time. Zara puts a hand over her chest as her heart beats faster and faster. Once again, Miranda's voice is heard. Liar. You're only saying that to make us more scared. Believe whatever you wish. But your current perception is false. Zara starts to hyperventilate. Please breathe, Zara. Well, it looks like it worked. Dreamer glances over to Miranda's cell, squinting his eyes. I'll allow you some time to dwell on the matter. Dreamer runs a hand over the device on his chest, its shine astoundingly high. He turns away and walks off into another room of the lair. Zara puts her hands on her neck and stretches it, staring off into the wall. You don't believe him, right? Miranda's voice travels over the wall. Zara doesn't respond, still trying to calm her breathing. Zara, don't go out on me. Zara lets out one final breath before it cuts to Wanderer's face, his eyes doozy and still fluttering open. He looks to the left and to the right before looking up, focusing onto something. Welcome back. They cut to an angle in front of Wanderer that shows Alan, Jake, and Mandy standing above the seated Wanderer, while Dylan is sat further away on the brown couch. Wanderer makes eye contact with Dylan. How am I alive? Alan steps forward, but Wanderer keeps his sight on Dylan. Dylan over there resurrected you. Impressive, right? Wanderer finally opens his eyes fully, also flicking his eyes over to Alan. How? I couldn't do that. Yeah, we're not entirely sure. Wanderer tries to move his hands, but they're locked behind his back, with the same cuffs that were on Brosnick. They cut to Dylan on the couch, with Brosnick standing a few feet to the right of Dylan. Dylan turns his head to look at Brosnick, who's standing uncomfortably. Something wrong? Brosnick immediately snaps his head to Dylan, his eye wide open. No, I'm just taking it all in. Dylan fully turns his body towards Brosnick. What exactly are you taking in? Dylan says before standing off the couch and stepping towards Brosnick. The fact that I can bring dead people back? The fact I threatened you into giving me an answer? Or maybe the fact that you work for my father, who is an absolute psycho? Brosnick stares at Dylan as he lifts off the multiple things. Which one is it? Maybe all of it, jackass. Dylan closes his eyes and turns back around to the couch, but decides to walk past it and over to the team with Wanderer, shoving past Alan and getting in front of all of them. Wanderer smiles big at Dylan. I heard you're a bit of a miracle worker. Keep talking and I'll reverse my miracle. Wanderer lets out a sharp chuckle. Seriously, though. Why bring me back? You need me for something, don't you? Wanderer squints his eyes and raises one eyebrow, inspecting Dylan's face. How well did you know our father? Wanderer bites his lip in thought. Not too well. I'm assuming about the same as you. Dylan goes off a small nod. So in your time, did he ever, attack you? Wanderer furrows his eyebrows. No, actually. Wait, was he the one who came in before I died? Dylan gives another nod, this one much more firm. You're trying to kill him, aren't you? Exactly. And that's where you come in. Wanderer takes a deep breath, looking at all the people stood in front of him before returning back to Dylan. He was a pretty shitty guy. I'm in. Dylan widens his eyes a little bit. That easy? You mind having your team give us some space? Dylan looks over to the rest of the team, nodding them off. As they start to walk away, Dylan looks back down at Wanderer, continuing to chat. We're planning on attacking as soon as we can figure out how to get to the Dream Realm. Can't Sarah get us there? Dylan closes his eyes and sighs. He took her. And Miranda. Wow. Yeah, I'll help. On one condition. Dylan raises an eyebrow, tilting his chin up. The blades. I would like them back. Dylan rolls his eyes. Don't even try to kill any of us because you won't get far. Yeah, I got it. Dylan fully walked away, and it cuts to the outside where Dylan is walking up a hill towards Wanderer's old grave. It cuts at the angle inside the grave where Dylan can be seen bending over and picking up the blades out of the grave, sliding the dirt off of them. Back inside, Dylan comes in and holds the blades in his hands, standing in front of Wanderer. Before I give these to you, I need you to promise me something. What's that? It cuts to the rest of the team standing to the side, talking to each other. Part of me is still unsure about working with Wanderer. Jake shrugs. Me too, but if we can get him fully on our side, think about the benefits. Yeah. Benefits. In the background, Dylan can be seen taking up the handcuffs from Wanderer. They walk over to the rest of the team, as Dylan reluctantly hands the blades over to Wanderer. The two merge with the rest of the team, as they all look at Wanderer with uncertainty. I'm coming along, and that's final. Yeah, but whatever. But what about him? Alan looks over to Brosnik, who's standing by himself, fiddling with the pack of cigarettes. Dylan puts his hand up Alan and starts to walk towards Brosnik. Brosnik looks over to Dylan and starts fidgeting with the cigarettes. Brosnik looks over to Dylan and continues to fidget with the cigarettes. You're coming with us. No, I don't need to come. You need to come to guide us. Brosnik looks around at the team behind Dylan nervously. Okay, fine. I'll come. What are you so nervous about? Brosnik looks back at Dylan. You know why. Brosnik's eye is filled with fear. Dylan nods his head before walking back towards the team. As they start to talk, it zooms in on a tiny black sphere that is still stuck on the wall next to the door. It cuts to a flipped angle where the team can be seen in the warehouse talking. It cuts to a dark room with a small white glow emitting from a monitor levitating in the air. A suited person has their hands behind their back and is standing behind Dreamer, who's intently watching the monitor. They're preparing to arrive. It cuts to the monitor screen where the team can be seen still in the warehouse, but pacing around the floor. The person behind Dreamer speaks. Would you like me to await them on the stairs? Dreamer watches the screen for a few more moments before replying to the figure. Yes. You should have no trouble dealing with them in a short time. After Dreamer's response, the figure quickly turns around and exits the room they're in. Dreamer keeps watching the screen with a tint of fear in his gaze. It cuts back to the warehouse, but everyone is outside besides Manny and Jake. Outside, the group of four is standing around each other beside Brosnik, who is smoking away from them. So, how are we getting to my home realm? Dylan looks over to Alan. My new power. You sure that's a good idea? I saw how you were at the Wanderer. Dylan and Alan look over to Wanderer, who's admiring his blades. You got a better idea? Alan nods. I do, actually. Alan steps forward and cracks his neck. Now, I didn't recommend this because, well... Alan gets into a running stance looking ahead. There's no promise it works. Dylan squints his eyes before Alan takes off with super speed. The other two looking over to Alan. Wanderer glances over to Dylan. What's he doing? Dylan shakes his head. I don't know, and if you keep looking at your blades like that, I might have to take them off your body. You'd kill me after you just resurrected me? Wanderer smirks, but Dylan just glares at Wanderer. It cuts to a small patch of grass, blowing in the light breeze before being thrown into the air from a long streak of cyan lightning. It cuts at the back of Alan as he's running. He stops and spins around as he slides across the ground before beginning to run again. This time, towards the camera. It cuts to a side view of him running, and it zooms in until a loud pop sound, and he stops running. It cuts to the front of Dylan and Wanderer as Brosnik walked into frame, the cigarette limp in his mouth. He can just do that? Exactly why you shouldn't be afraid. Brosnik nods his head to the side slightly before it cuts back to Alan, who's walking towards the three. I'm done. Alan looks over his shoulder and points at the vortex that's formed above where he was running, the grass below it black and streaked. It cuts a bit closer to Dylan's face. Let's go kill my dad. It cuts back to Dreamer's lair. Zara and Miranda both look absolutely defeated from Dreamer's confession earlier. Both are sat against the wall separating them, looking at the walls directly in front of them. So do you believe him? Zara glances over her shoulder a little bit. How would it even be possible, though? I don't know. The two stay silent, letting it fill the air. What do you think will happen when Dylan wakes up? Zara breaks the air. We die? This response makes Zara's breath catch within her throat. No. That cannot be it. Why do you sound so nervous? Zara furrows her brows. You're telling me you're not nervous? That our existence is at stake? Miranda chuckles on the other side of the wall. Tell me the last time Team Underdog has lost. What does that have anything to do with this conversation? Listen, all I'm saying is that we'll probably end up being fine. Before she has a chance to respond, footsteps fill the room, making the two flinch up and look at the force field of the cell. Dreamer can be seen walking towards the cell, looking at the two girls back and forth. Welp, the time has come. They cut to the behind of Dreamer, showing the girls in front of him, standing at their force fields, looking at Dreamer. For what? Cut to Dreamer's face. The conclusion of this story. It cuts to the four walking through the dream realm, all of them in a horizontal line. Alan, Wander, and Dylan are all dead set on the towering indigo base that lies ahead of them, while Brosnick is looking off in other directions, his teeth nipping at his bottom lip. Is there anything we should expect, Brosnick? As if he was zoned out, Brosnick gasps when Dylan talks before replying. Well, he's usually not there, but he has this bodyguard. Alan and Dylan raise an eyebrow and look over to Brosnick. What kind of bodyguard? Well, he always wears his sleek blue suit and tie, dark blue. And his head, it ain't no normal head. Wander seems to take the not normal head part the most. What's that mean? Brosnick tries to think, closing his one eye. I don't remember it exactly, but his head was some sort of object. I was always scared to look at it. Why the hell do we have this guy along? You already had the base location, right? Dylan looks back to the lair, which they are approaching more. To bargain. Leverage, of course. Brosnick's eye widened at Dylan's remark. It cuts to a shot of the blazing yellow sun, surrounded by blue clouds that litter the pink sky. The camera cuts to a pair of black dress shoes fit tightly around someone's feet. They're worn right below a piece of teal pants and a spotless teal suit and teal tie. The person can be seen with no neck, but their head is just out of frame. It cuts to a long indigo staircase in front of Dreamer's lair. The four can be seen ascending the stairs. The dress-shoed person steps closer to the edge of the top stair. The four all stop suddenly and look at who stands atop the stairs. The person talks. Foolish. He got you too. It cuts to a clock on the inside of a wall of a warehouse. It doesn't tick. The camera pans down to show Jake and Mandy stood by the main console, viewing over the vitals of Dylan and Alan. Rain can be heard hitting the metal roof as Mandy points at the side of the screen where Dylan is. Jake looks at Mandy. His heartbeat. Why is it so fast? Jake looks away from Mandy and back at the screen. Dylan's BPM is steadily increasing. Jake waves it off. He's fine. Mandy sighs and sits down on a small stool. It pans back to the clock, and then cuts to a floating clock at Dreamer's lair, above the teal suit. It's Timanizer. He didn't get me. I've been with him since the first day we met. Wander's arms ablades as he stares up at Timanizer. Dylan sees this in his peripheral vision, hovering a hand over Wanderer. Here's one for you. Tell me the truth. Brosnick looks over at Dylan, squinting their eye and glancing at Timanizer. What? The truth. Brosnick, explain it. Brosnick looks at Dylan again, shocked. I thought that was you, Brosnick. Brosnick closes her eye, sighing. Go ahead. Tell him everything. It gets to Timanizer's head, the hour and minute hand on top of each other, pointing at the 12. About what? The coma? Yeah, just everything. The other three are confused and looking at each other. What do you mean? The hands on Time Manager's head start to spin out of control. The stairs start to levitate up and become level with the floor Time Manager's standing on. Dylan. Not you, Wanderer, but Dylan. You're in a coma. Wanderer squints as he tightens his grip on his blades as Dylan and Alan continue to stare skeptically. I should keep this brief. You're waking up and this fantasy world is breaking. Nah. Dylan holds his right hand out and tries to use his gravity powers, but the time is stopped by Time Manager. The hands on his face stop moving and he starts to walk forward. All 4 of them are stood there, frozen. Time Manager stops in front of Brosnick and holds his index finger near Brosnick's forehead. It zooms in on his finger as he starts to edge it closer and closer to touching Brosnick's forehead, until Time Manager flings his head to the right and sees Alan moving at normal speed. I'm gonna need you to stop. It cuts to a close shot of Alan rubbing his hands together as a spark of lightning surges between them, jumping through his fingers of palm. Alan then quickly brings his left hand back, creating a chain of lightning between his 2 hands. It zooms on the crackling blue lightning as he extends the chain further back before clapping his hands together, sending the chain through his fingertips and out towards Time Manager. Right when the lightning hits Time Manager, time goes back to normal and Dylan's power hits nothing. Time Manager falls to his back, but he immediately dismantles his body and refigures it back to his standing stance as the pieces flow into place. Wanderer takes initiative and chucks both blades toward Time Manager's head. But also instantly, the hands on Time Manager's face go to the one and the blades turn into water, splashing into the ground. Wanderer's mouth drops and he looks at his opened hands as he tries to recall them. Wanderer fiddles with the gauntlets on his wrists as the camera moves to Dylan and Alan, who are standing side by side. Where the hell did Brosnick go? Dylan whispers to Alan. I told him to go inside and find Dreamer. Works for me. It cuts to Time Manager, who grabs onto his head and launches it at Alan and Dylan like it's a frisbee. Alan speeds into Dylan, grabbing him and stepping out of the path of the head. It cuts to the head as it misses the 2, and it rebounds and returns, slanting slightly. Time Manager catches it and tosses it back into place above his suit, almost like it has its own gravitational pull. He readjusts his tie before placing his palms together, creating 2 gigantic clocks appear to his sides. The floor they're all standing on begins to fold like a blanket. As the floor falls, they fall into the middle of it and it encloses around them. They stop falling and the floor dissolves. The environment around them has become a snowy wasteland. Time Manager is nowhere to be found. Wanderer, Dylan, and Alan look at each other. Where in the hell are we? Dylan looks around frantically, trying to see through the white fog made by the snow. We haven't gone anywhere. Alan starts to walk away from the group. They look at him confused. Alan holds his hand out and zooms off before returning right after. You guys like snow globes? It cuts to the shell of a snow globe. Snow falling lightly. Time Manager is holding it before he throws it in the air and starts to walk away. Suddenly the sky widens around him and snow begins to plow towards him. It blankets over him, and it cuts to Dylan, Alan, and Wanderer out of the snow globe and on their feet. Dylan glowing rainbow. As the glow fades, he takes some deep breaths, trying not to fall over. You good? Alan glances over to Dylan, who gives a nod in response. Time Manager teleports out of the snow and wipes a hand over his suit, erasing the snow. Huh. Fascinating. Dylan takes a deep breath before slinging his hand out. The hands on Time Manager's face stop their slow ticking, a grandfather clock chime ringing out. What have you done? I don't know. Dylan's eyes flutter as Time Manager stumbles backwards. Reverse it. I can help you. Wanderer looks at Dylan and Alan and charges at Time Manager. Bring the blades back and maybe we'll save you. Alan looks up from Dylan and Wanderer concerned. Of course. Time Manager quickly makes Wanderer's blades appear in the thin air. Wanderer catches them and smiles big. Thanks. It cuts to a shot of the blade spinning in his hand before being thrown by Wanderer, going straight through Time Manager's face, shattering the clock. Suddenly, the entire dream realm shakes as Time Manager falls to the ground limp. Wanderer looks back at Dylan and Alan, worried. Let's hurry up. Wanderer sets the blades back into place on his back and beginning to jog towards the opening of Dreamer's base. Dylan is still slightly doozy from the use of the power. Hey Dylan, Wanderer got Time Manager. Good. Hey. Let's not pass out, dumbass. Alan holds onto Dylan and speeds into the base. Inside, the air is thick. No noises beside the frantic pacing of Wanderer, who's checking every crevice of the room. They're not here, Wanderer shouts across the room to Alan. How? Wanderer shakes his head as he approaches Alan and Dylan. Earth. Both look down at the weak voice of Dylan. Alan flicks his head up at Wanderer, who's already looking back at him. It cuts to Earth where rain is pouring harder than ever. Jake and Mandir stood outside and looking at something in the distance. It cuts to the portal behind the warehouse where the four first enter the dream realm. Alan runs out, still holding Dylan before Wanderer falls out of the portal, quickly getting up. The three take in the new environment, all their eyes growing wide. Alan runs a hand over his face, shocked. Where is he? Alan and Wanderer look around the area as Dylan begins to regain his grip. Alright, I'm good. Alan lets go of Dylan as he stands tall, taking slow, deep breaths. It cuts back to Jake and Mandy in front of the warehouse, tornadoes swirling far ahead of the two. The camera pans down and reveals Dreamer, standing there, Zara and Miranda passed out next to him. He's staring at the two as the three run up to him. Behind Dreamer, Brosnick stands there shyly. Seeing the three appear makes him less shy. Finally. It cuts back to the team. Wanderer tries to charge Dreamer with the blades, but Dylan stops him using his gravity powers. After letting go, Wanderer steps back and lets Dylan be the one to step forward. Let them go. It cuts back to Dreamer, and the two pass out beside him. 1. Dylan furrows his eyebrows and responds back louder. Both. Dreamer closes his eyes and gives a small shake of his head. You choose which one. Dylan's eyebrows relax as he moves his eyes to Zara and Miranda. Choose fast. I need to choose for you. Dylan looks back at Dreamer. Talk first. Tell me about this coma shit. Dreamer squints at Dylan's words and traces a finger along the indent of the device on his chest. What do you want to know? Dylan takes another step forward. Is it true? Is all this just a part of my imagination? Dreamer bites his lips while thinking. Yes and no. It is, but it may as well be real. What happens when I wake up? Dylan takes another step, stretching out his hands as the rain hits his bare face. You wake up, simple as that. Probably in some hospital. What about them? Dylan points at the group standing behind him. Or them. Dylan points at Zara and Miranda, who are still unconscious. That's a little more complicated. Do they die? Do they wake up with me? Well, it depends. Dreamer turns over to his shoulder and waves Brosnick to step forward. He steps up behind Miranda. They die? They won't follow you into the next world. You die, you wake up. You don't die, you and them will still wake up. Dreamer snaps, making Miranda instantly wake up. So what you're saying is, no matter what, I win. Dreamer's face drops. Miranda looks up and sees the situation and begins to panic, standing up and looking at Dreamer. Dreamer singles to Brosnick, making him punch her hard, sending her to the floor. No! Brosnick, listen to me. Dreamer raises an eyebrow as Brosnick glances up to Dylan. I know you're scared of him, but you don't have to be. We are going to stop him right here, right now. Dreamer fully turns to face Brosnick as they begin to have a conversation. Wander and Alan start to get impatient. Dylan, we can't just stand around forever. He's right, we need to do something, or... Alan gestures to the recovering Miranda. Do what? Time and ours were like half of him. Think about what he could do. Wander hustles along with Alan, but they step backwards. Dreamer looks back at Dylan. Well, I've chosen. Brosnick steps behind Miranda, and a blade can be seen sliding out from her chest. It cuts to a front view of the team. They all gasp in shock, except Wander, who furrows his brows in anger. Dylan puts a hand over his mouth as Alan and Wander siege Dreamer and Brosnick. The background blurs as it zooms in on Dylan. He backs up towards Jake and Mandy, and his breathing is hasty. Jake pushes him on the back, snapping him back to reality. Go help them, Underdog! Dylan's eyes widen, and he launches himself and begins to fly towards the brawl that can be seen. Dreamer is occupied with Alan and Wanderer as Brosnick drags Zara's unconscious body through the mud. Dylan looks between the two before deciding to fly at Brosnick and Zara. Dylan tackles Brosnick into the ground, sliding across the dirt. Dylan sends one punch at his face before climbing off his body and rushing over to Zara. After endless shaking, she finally gasps awake and immediately meets Dylan's eyes. Hey, are you okay? Zara blinks slowly, taking in Dylan's face. She reaches for his cheek. After taking some slow breaths, she finally responds. I've gotten captured too many times. Dylan's face rises in amusement as a laugh escapes from his mouth. I was worried sick about you. You'll have to try a little harder to get rid of me. Dylan's face has a huge grin as he leans closer to Zara's face. Did he do anything to you? Zara shakes her head, smiling slightly back at Dylan. Enough talking. Now go kill your dad. Zara gives a small chuckle which Dylan smiles at before standing up and taking a long breath. He then turns and starts to walk towards the battle between the three. Wander is holding his blade in a steel block against Dreamer whilst Alan is being held in place by Dreamer. Suddenly, as Dylan's about to attack, his right foot falls into a small hole in the ground. He looks down as he's pulling a foot out. The hole is empty, just endless void. Dylan furrows his brows for a second but decides to ignore it and continues marching towards Dreamer. It cuts to an angle of his hands as he's pulling his fingers, cracking and stretching them. After he's done doing this, he shakes his hand slightly before grasping a fist. It glows pink, and then he raises the fist and opens both hands, causing lightning to violently strike from the sky directly onto Dreamer. Stunned, Dreamer loses his attack on Wanderer and his hold on Alan. Dylan walks up to Dreamer and holds his hand out again, a bit wobbly this time. Dylan uses his gravity powers to try and forcefully pull the device off from his chest. Dreamer crosses his arms, causing the waves of Dylan's powers to bend and redirect back at Dylan, sending him flying backwards. Alan quickly catches him and puts him back on the ground. Damn, that's the third time today. Don't kill yourself. Dylan looks at Alan, only gives a small glare before looking back at Dreamer. Dylan holds his hands out in two different directions, causing the tornadoes in the distance to start toppling towards the battle in the warehouse. Dylan releases the tornadoes as they stay on their path toward Dreamer, and he steps forward and slings his open palms upward, causing the ground to make a vertical spike like a mountain, the peak as sharp as a knife. Dreamer barely dodges the first one but is scathed by the second one. Instantly, Dreamer heals a small wound and looks up at Dylan, who's rushing towards him holding an odd gesture in his hand, along with Wanderer, while Alan is standing back, regaining his breath. Wanderer jumps in the air at Dreamer, but Dreamer puts his hand out and twists it counterclockwise, causing Wanderer to stop midair. As this is happening, Dylan sends a flaming punch towards Dreamer, but he snaps, making Dylan just run in a time loop of when he was charging at Dreamer. This strange gesture still held on Dylan's hand. As Dreamer continues twisting his hands, Wanderer's body starts to swirl before completely disintegrating. Then, Dreamer flicks the air, making Dylan fly backwards and slide against the ground. As Dylan gets up, Alan speeds at Dreamer and starts to fight him. Dylan shakes his head before looking at his hand and tightening the odd symbol he's creating with his fingers. Dylan pushes himself on the floor and walks towards Alan and Dreamer. It cuts to Alan, who's speeding around Dreamer, dodging his swings before he gets shocked backwards, sending him across the grass. Dreamer! Dreamer turns around. You don't have the respect to call me your father? You've never earned my respect. Dreamer snaps, making the landscape turn pale white, along with secluding Dylan and Dreamer in the blank room. Let's talk. Dylan raises his right hand. Nah. Dylan releases the symbol. Suddenly, a Wanderer appears from thin air as a rainbow dust cloud forms in front of Dreamer and grabs the device on Dreamer's chest, twisting it. The device unlocks off his chest as Dreamer tries to wrestle out of Wanderer's grip. Wanderer pulls back with the device in hand and gives it to Dylan, backing up further. The white room collapses and they're standing right where they were 5 minutes ago. Dreamer steps backwards, running a hand over his now open spot on his chest. Put it back! Wanderer whispers it to Dylan. You powerless without this? Dreamer holds both hands out and steps towards the two in the device. Dylan steps back and raises the device out of reach. Suddenly, more of the floor becomes similar to the hole that Dylan trapped in earlier. It's over. It's been over. It cuts to a wide shot of the three. The other three team members walking in the frame behind Dylan. The world around them is tearing itself apart, from the rain, tornadoes, and deterioration of the earth itself. Dreamer suddenly tries to run away, but Wanderer throws a blade into the back of his leg, making him fall to the ground in pain. Wanderer walks up to Dreamer as the rest of the team watches. Wanderer holds a blade over Dreamer's neck. Please, kill me. Wanderer glances back to Dylan, who gives him a look. Wanderer pulls the blade away and sheaths it onto his back, going back to the team. Well, from here, we're going into the unknown. Once we jump into the void, who knows what will show up. The four around Dylan all exchange nervous looks. But no matter what, we'll find each other. I promise you that. Dylan nods at the team before walking away to Dreamer, who's on the floor, holding onto the gash on his leg. How's it feel? Watching your little game fall apart. Dreamer looks at Dylan, his face full of despair. Why spare me? It cuts to Dylan. To show that I'm better than you. Not stronger than you, but a better person. Someone who can value others. Value others, says you. At least it's not you saying it. Dylan turns around but says one last thing before walking off. So long, Dad. Dylan walks away and back to the team, leaving Dreamer to sit alone as the world falls around him. Back at the group of team members, Manny is seen already attempting to jump in. She's fidgety and nervous, but is being reassured by Jake and Alan. Dylan goes over to Wander, who's standing at the edge of the ground, overlooking the endless growing void. "We gonna find each other too?" Dylan stands next to Wander and looks up to him. "Maybe. That's up to you. I think some soul searching would do me some good." Dylan nods. "Good luck, Wanderer." "See you soon, Dylan." Wanderer takes a deep breath before going limp and falling into the void, fading away as he falls further. Dylan looks back to Mandy, who finally brought up the courage to fall into the void, Alan and Jake watching. Dylan goes over to them. "Well, I'll see you two soon. God, I hope so. I'm scared, to be honest." Dylan hugs Jake and looks over to Alan, who has a faint smile on his face. They release the embrace. "Well, let's not keep the new world waiting." And with that, Jake gives a small nod to Alan before jumping off the ground and into the void. Dylan looks at Alan. "We good?" "Yeah, we're good." Man, crazy month. Still confused about this new world shit. Same here. Well, I can't lie, I'm excited and also scared, so I'm gonna get going too. "See you soon, Alan." Alan nods at Dylan. "See you soon." Alan does a dive off the edge into the void, leaving Dylan alone. It cuts to Dylan approaching Zara on the floor. She's sitting down with her legs in front of her. Zara looks up at Dylan, pushing herself off the ground with a groan. "You did it. You didn't want to help?" Zara stretches out and lets out a yawn. "He had us on metal beds." Zara looks around and sees the world collapsing. What now? Dylan takes a deep breath and looks around as well. Only way out is... Dylan looks down into the blank, endless void. Down. Dylan starts to walk towards the edge, but Zara stops him, grabbing onto his left arm. Dylan looks over his shoulder at Zara. "Yeah?" Zara pulls Dylan to herself and grabs onto him, kissing him. This time, Dylan kisses back. They both pull away as the world continues crumbling behind them. Dylan steps back. "Well, you ready?" Zara nods and steps next to Dylan, looking down with him. Dylan looks over at Zara and grips onto her hand. "I know I am." Zara looks at Dylan, shaking hand. "Sure you are." Dylan rolls his eyes. "Well, here we go." Dylan looks back at Dreamer one last time as Zara tightens a grip between their hands and steps forward into the emptiness. Dylan pulls the two closer together as they plummet down, fading into the void.